We'd now like to share with you a former Blades assistant manager, former Blades manager, and technically former registered as a player. Not many people can say that. Kevin Blackwell, welcome to the Sheff United Way. How do we find you today, sir?
We find myself in good shape, and looking forward to this podcast.
Excellent. Because, like Hal said, you've got a lot of hats that you've worn whilst Sheffield United, employee, shall we say. But before we get into talking about Sheffield United, do you want to start off by telling us a little bit about your playing career? Because, I think a lot of people watching this video might not know about your playing career as much.
Yeah, I mean, it all started with me with 𝗵𝗿𝗱𝗶𝗲 and Big Ron Atkinson. And I was at Cambridge United as a kid, and Barry and Ron were big pals, and Ron asked me, sent me out on loan to Bedford Town, where Barry was managing as a 16-year-old. And then I came back, and I had my father was reluctant to allow me to go into full-time football. I'd had two big pals of mine who were 2 years older than me, and one had gone to Chelsea and one had gone to Derby, and both were released at 18, and they found it very difficult to get a career at the age of 18. Allowed me to go in, and I went to sixth form college to become a games teacher, but I was playing top non-league football then, and I played at Wembley in the FA Vase at 18 for Barton Rovers, and I played in the trophy. I went to Boston United, got signed from Barnet for 10,000. Barry sold me and bought me and sold me twice, I think, inside 5 years, because Barry's one hell of a wheeler dealer, as you know. I remember Neil ringing me on the phone. I was at Barnet, and I just we'd had our first child, and I said, I'm not going to go back up the north. I want to come, because I'm a London boy. And somehow Neil persuaded me to go up there. But I went up there, and from the 1st of November, I think I went up there in 86. We never lost a game. I got player of the year. We got into the Football League. And then I ended up playing for Torquay, Notts County, Huddersfield, Plymouth. So yeah, had a range of clubs, and then certainly registered on the bench for Sheffield United, but never got on in one of the competitive games. But yeah, so it was one of those, not illustrious careers, but a career all the same.
Absolutely. You just listed some of the clubs there. So what was the highlight of your playing days?
It's hard to say, because one of the highlights was at Notts County, and even though I didn't play, we had a great squad there, and there was a squad of 17 of us, 18 of us, and we got all the way up to the Premier League, and Steve Cherry was in goal. And when we were in the Premier League, he got voted the third best player it was the last year of the old First Division. The next year became the Premier League. And you couldn't argue. Ches got player of the year 2 years on the trot with Craig Short. So I couldn't argue, but we had a great set of lads, and we were just doing things brilliantly to take Notts County into the old First Division. And playing wise, I suppose it was playing at Wembley a couple of times. I was twice on the bench, and I played twice. And but really, with football, you have your highs and your lows. I had a major injury for 3 years, smashed my leg, did the ankle, leg, and ligaments, and it put me out of the game for 2 years. Right when I was on the cusp of moving to Derby County. Who were at that time were a well-established First Division side, Premier League side, and it sort of stopped my progress in terms of playing wise. But really, it's the people I've met along the way, I think, that really I've enjoyed. But as I say, Notts County was special because of what we did as a group, and we trained together every day, worked together. We went out together, we socialised together, and achieved something terrific, even though I didn't really play that much for them.
Oh, fair enough. Let's move on to talking about the Blades. In 1999, Neil Warnock brought you in as the assistant manager and as the goalkeeper. So how did that work?
Well, he brought me in as the goalkeeping coach, the assistant manager. And then I think we had a problem with the goalkeeper, so I ended up having to resign. It was I really came as the assistant manager, and we left Bury. It was Neil's dream job. He was so made up. It was that's the happiest I've ever seen him. The first time we ever turned in at Bramble Lane, We'd always be on the bus to games and always looking at the Blades result, whatever. And then to turn up there and to be the manager was just his dream, absolute dream come true. And obviously to come alongside with him. And we had a really great time and really set Sheffield United on the road again for it being a really good side again. The club had been meandering for a little while, and it set us up. I think we set the club up really for the next 10 years of always being in around the playoffs, either promoted. We had great cup runs. Last, it was just an exciting time.
What were your first impressions of Sheffield United, though, back in 1999? A very different club then.
The impression was still that, I played against Sheffield United in the FA Cup for Boston United when Colin Morris and Keith Edwards and all that were playing. And it was always a good stadium. It's got an atmosphere about Bramall Lane's got an atmosphere that, unless you've been there and unless you've worked there, you just don't understand it. It's special. And I would say that when I went there, we just left Bury, and with the greatest respect to Bury, Bramall Lane is an absolute Rolls Royce compared to Bury. So it was a real exciting time. It's the first club we'd had who got a lift to go upstairs to another floor. So we think that showed how big Sheffield United was.
That's a really, really good point. I was in that the other day as well, Hal.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, sorry to bring that up again.
Yeah. My ticket's still on the way, yeah?
Still on the way, mate. Still on the way. Yeah, so we've just touched on it. You were a registered player for the Blades. Did you ever think that you'd get a chance to don those gloves again for the Blades?
Well, it was funny because obviously I'd been Neil's main goalkeeper for quite a while. And then, like I say, then I went to Notts County and I started doing my coaching badges, and I was doing coaching and doing match analysis when we weren't involved in games. I then went to Plymouth and I'd finished. I went to Huddersfield, and then I'd sort of finished. But the goalkeeper there, they called Clark, had got an injury, and so the gaffer said to me, "Look, Blackie, I need you to come back in and keep training and keep fit." And I ended up playing, I think, 10, 15 games for Huddersfield in the promotion year. Behind Steve Francis, so whenever Steve got injured. So then when I went to Sheffield United, Neil sort of expected me just to say, if there's a problem, Blackie will go in goal. And that's what it was. So really, I tried to train after the lads had finished training. I'd train on my own.
Right.
And so, but really, I think that, Trace was in goal and it did really well, Trace. Legend there as well. And really, it didn't take us long. And I said to the gaffer, with the greatest respect, you know what I mean? I was 38 at the time, and I was doing the reserves, I was doing the first team. I just felt that we needed another goalkeeper, and the one that we obviously chose was Paddy Kenny, who we brought in from Bradford Park Avenue, and myself and Paddy worked for quite a while on our own to get him fit, to get him used to professional football when he came from part-time football. And Paddy went on to be, like I say, one of the best goalkeepers Sheffield United had for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Mad as a box of frogs, but what a keeper.
Yeah, Paddy, I remember his mum ringing me up and saying, Paddy's coming home. And he said, this was at Bury, and he's coming home and straight to bed. What's wrong? I said, he's just getting used to professional football. And he'd got a bit of weight to lose, to be fair, when he first came in. But I'd like to think that those were the groundings that made Paddy, helped him to become that professional footballer. But there's no doubt, but I don't think Paddy ever got the credit that other people, if you've worked with Paddy, you understand how good a goalkeeper is. But Paddy was always one of those that you could say he could pull off a save when it was needed. And he got a bit of stick from the Bury players when we first came. Who's this fat lad from Bradford Park Avenue? And we'd got Dean Kiley, a very good goalkeeper at the time.
Yeah.
And I think Bury had just been up in the Championship, and they'd got some good players in Chris Lecchetti and people like that. And they were a little bit, well, more than a little bit, critical of Paddy. But believe you me, I think Paddy's thrown, over the years, Paddy's thrown it down their throat. And I think all of them have to accept that, like I say, Paddy was one of the better goalkeepers in the UK, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get on to your time as a manager, just while we're in this assistant manager role, have you got a highlight of your time working alongside Neil with Sheffield United? Because I think we all know some pretty emotional and memorable games took place while you were assistant.
Old Trafford, Arsenal.
David Seaman.
David Seaman's greatest ever save in his career. I remember the following week, everybody was talking. It brought back the memories of Gordon Banks, and they, were relaying it along those lines. And we were exceptional. I mean, what that year was just absolutely incredible. I think, did we play? Was it 10 something Premier League sides in the League Cup and the league, and he beat them all? I think near enough.
Well, we played Leeds twice, didn't we?
Leeds United, the League Cup game.
Liverpool,
Sunderland,
Arsenal.
Leeds, Liverpool, Arsenal. Yeah. I mean, it was.
Who else?
But the Leeds game at home. The Leeds game at home, when Nuddy scored, and then Jags smashed that one in. We were losing 1-0 with about 5 minutes to go, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
Would that be right for the League Cup game? Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Bramall Lane's atmosphere when it was like that, it's just incredible. Just incredible. And we had the Nottingham Forest semi-final. Oh, what a game that
amazing.
was. And Pesh coming on, and Pesh running up the pitch shouting, "Oh my God, oh my God!" I mean, they were that's I think it must be hard for anybody else to come up with a season that was as good as that season. We only missed out on 2 more games a professional club could have played in, and that was the League Cup final and the FA Cup final. And other than that, we played 65 games, I think, that year.
Crazy.
I remember we played Arsenal at Old Trafford, and what a game that was. And we lost 1-0, and we were very unfortunate. And I was doing some work with Prozone, and Prozone said that they would let us have all the running stats and all the figures because they felt that we were a really good chance of going to the Premier League. So for that game, they gave me all the stats, and in that stats, we outran Arsenal. In that previous 4 years, Arsenal had only ever, and we're talking about the Invincibles, Arsenal had only ever outrun over distances and over short spells by Bayern Munich, Barcelona, I think it was Valencia and someone. It was 4 of the world's top sides, and we outran them and whatever. And that year we were phenomenal. We played Arsenal, and on the Tuesday night we had to play Nottingham Forest. And I know 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏, the manager, we asked him would he put it back 24 hours to the Wednesday, and he refused. And we know why, because obviously we were both going for the playoffs and promotion. Anyway, on the Tuesday night we outran Nottingham Forest and beat them 1-0. And 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, he was screaming in the dressing room, and he said, and that lot up there, they just played fucking Arsenal, he said. And they've just gone, and we outran them. And the following day, I had phone calls from all over football. What are you doing? How are you doing it? And what's the recovery procedures? What are you doing? Because they couldn't believe that. Because when we played Arsenal at Old Trafford that day, it was red hot.
Yeah, it was
baking.
I remember that.
And we once again recovered within less than 48 hours and went again and beat Nottingham Forest 1-0. Yeah. So there's so incredible. Many games, but that year was special.
Yeah. The thing is, people of our age constantly talk about that season, and it's crazy to think we achieved nothing. We achieved a lot of things, but we achieved nothing at the end of the day, and it's just criminal because of how good we were that season. I think that's my favourite season supporting Sheff United of all time, and we've had promotions, we've had other things, so it sticks in people's minds, that triple assault season.
I think it was because there were so many electrifying games at Bramall Lane. It wasn't one, the Liverpool game, and then we went to Anfield to extra time, and Jamesy should have got sent off, but we were taking top sides all the way. We were more than competing against them. And Arsenal were hanging on in the semi-final. Liverpool were hanging on in the second leg up at Anfield. And like I say, every week seemed to be a game, and it got better and better and better. And but you're right. At the end of the day, we didn't achieve anything. But what I think it did, that for me was the year before we'd been building. Because to be honest, after the second year, me and Neil felt that I felt we were close to being sacked. Results weren't brilliant. We had to make major changes when we first came, where the squad was top heavy. The money that was spewing out of the club, Derek, God bless him, Derek Dooley, and that were adamant we had to cut the wage bill. and that rebuilding process that went on there, and then it started to come, but that built the club. And for the next 4 or 5 years, the club was always pushing and got to the Premier League in that side 4 or 5 years after that. So really, it was a process of building and moving forward that was key to the success of the club. And Sheffield United now have been a force at the top end of the Championship or into the Premier League for the last 10 years.
You've just spoken so passionately about that wonderful time. So why did you want to leave? Because tell us about that move to Leeds United in 2003, which I don't think Neil Warnock was a huge fan of.
No. The situation was obviously myself and we were building a really good team. It was playing really good football. And it was recognised that we'd beaten quite a few Premier League sides in both competitions. And I think, a lot of people recognised that my work was on the training ground, and Neil's, his man management skills, second to none. And the situation was, as we were building the club up, obviously, we were getting a lot of plaudits, and I'd been offered 2 opportunities to leave the club, 3 opportunities to leave the club, and I just felt that it wasn't the right time to leave. And United allowed me to use, we were using Sports Code, we were using Prozone, we were using all this sort of stuff, and they bought it and allowed me to do that. And I just felt that the other clubs I could have gone to, I felt weren't as progressive in that manner, and I felt it would knock me back. And plus the fact I didn't have the greatest career as a player, so you then when you make that decision to move, it has to be right. And I've been with Neil for so long, and out of the blue, a phone call came. Leeds United had just been beaten, I think, that year by Valencia, or the year before, 1-0 in the semi-final. They'd got a great squad of players. We played against them twice. And the opportunity, I felt, was right to move then. And Peter Reid approached the club, and I spoke to Derek Dooley, went to him and had a long chat. And it just felt the timing was right and the club was right. It didn't turn out that way in the end with the club, but I just took that opportunity. And I think at some point, I had to step outside the shadow of Neil. I'd learned as much as I could. And then I also felt that I needed to learn a bit more from someone else to see how someone else approached the game, and that's really what it was. I felt, and I did say, I felt it would have been my last job as an assistant, and after that I would go on my own, because by then I think I'd have worked with 2 of the best managers in the country to 2 of the best clubs, and I wasn't prepared to have an apprenticeship for a year or 2 years. I had a 6-7 year apprenticeship, and it stood me in good stead, all that learning.
Apologies if this is a bad question or a you don't appreciate it, but was it a mistake leaving, or was it something that you needed to do to figure out what kind of to do in future or not to do? Did you regret that decision to move to Leeds?
I regretted leaving a great squad of players in a club that we had a real affinity to. It was tough at Leeds. I wasn't aware of the financial difficulties at the club, and then I'd only been there 2 weeks, and next thing is Harry Kewell's gone. Numerous players are gone. We couldn't sign anybody, and I asked. That was my fault. I should have found out about the finances. But normally, as a coach, you don't normally do. Leeds have been in the semi-final of the European Cup the year before, so that was the problem. But I'd gone, as I said, really, because Peter Reid. I'd known about Peter Reid, and they talked about his enthusiasm, his passion, his knowledge for the game, and I just felt that I needed, for my last part of my education, to work with someone different other than Neil. I knew Neil's strengths and weaknesses inside out. But that isn't the only way football is delivered, and I just felt that, as I said earlier on, I needed to be the best coach I could be, and to be as successful as I could be. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in the game very long, because I wasn't a Thierry Henry, or I hadn't got a big name in the game. So I had to have a good name as a coach, and that's what I did.
So tell us what happened in 2008, Kevin. Obviously, you came back. You took the managerial role off Brian Robson at that time, and he wasn't great for the Blades. I don't think he was great for some clubs, but not for the Blades. And actually, I was likening this earlier on when I was doing the research to 𝗍𝗍𝗶𝗲 coming in and taking over 𝗍𝗨𝗫𝐵𝐿 at Sheffield United recently, because it was a similar time. And you did really, really well when you came back and took charge of the Blades towards the end of that season. So how did that all come about?
Well, I'd obviously then I'd gone on managerial career, and then I'd gone to Luton Town after I left Leeds. And Luton went bust. And I announced that I would leave the club after we played Liverpool in the FA Cup. And we took Liverpool to a replay up to Anfield. And I got a phone call 3 days later from Terry Robinson, who was the acting chairman, and said, "Look, Blackie, we'd like you to come in and work alongside Brian, to be fair." And I said, "Well, fair enough." And so really, I'd agreed to come in as assistant to Brian Robson. But Brian, I think, had changed his mind about staying at the club, and he announced he was leaving. So Terry said to me that look, Blackie, you will obviously take the team. So that's what I did, and I think we were third or fourth from bottom. I think when I came on the 18th of February, and we had 12 games or 13 games, 14, something like that.
14, I think it was.
14 games, and I think we won 8, drew 4, lost 2, I think. And
nearly 14 games, 8 wins, 3 draws, 3 defeats. So very good.
I just want to jump in with one thing that you mentioned, which is that Brian Robson made the decision to leave rather than him being asked to leave by the board. Is that correct?
Well, as far as I knew, I was going up to help Brian.
Right.
That's all I know now. Other than the rest, that was between Brian and the club, and I never really asked the question as whether he got pushed or whether he went. But
because we don't really know.
Sorry,
we don't really know either, and
no.
The board have no obligation to explain it to us, of course.
No. Yeah, exactly. And like I say, as I was coming up, I was going up to help Brian.
Well, that makes sense. And then, as we mentioned, not only did you become manager, it started really, really well. And actually, your win percentage as permanent manager of Sheffield United actually does stand up and is very good. And that season after, you steered the Blades to third place finish, 3 points off second. But as usual, with the Blades, when we were doing well, we sold a key player in 𝗵𝗵𝗂𝗐𝗔, and that took a huge, well, for all of us fans, a huge blow, and I'd imagine for you, really, really difficult.
I think any coach manager would tell you that to lose their top scorer is always a blow. 𝗵𝗵𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏 was very complimentary to me, and felt that I'd got him back on track after his struggle at Everton and under Brian, to be fair. But he was terrific around the club. I could not speak highly enough of him. And then he was banging goals in. And next thing is, on deadline day, in January, we got a phone call from Stoke, Tony Pulis, and he ended up going to Stoke. It was a bitter blow. But when the club says that they need the money or whatever, then as a manager and a coach, you can't just carry on and spend, or if the club runs into problems and you have to sell players because of it, you can't just put your head in a pillow and take the notice of it. You have to work for the club. And unfortunately, they felt that they needed the money and that 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗏s' wages were too heavy, and that they couldn't afford to carry them. So it was a financial decision. But one I felt cost us promotion that year, because we never signed another major striker after that. No matter what we did, we couldn't find a striker, and that led to a bit of friction between myself and the board. And but that's how it is, and you just sometimes wonder when your career's at a level, what things can change your path. And I felt losing 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗏s at that time, because we had a couple of games where I felt if we'd have had 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗏s, we'd have done it. But I've got to give credit to the players, because even without beats, as you quite rightly say, it all went to the last game of the season at Crystal Palace. Birmingham were at Reading and we were at Palace. And we absolutely battered Crystal Palace from start to finish. Couldn't score.
Couldn't score. 0-0.
And we had some diabolical refereeing decisions. I remember Morgan being pulled down and Sky saying, well, there was at least 3 penalties that should have been given to us that day. Clint Hill grabbing hold of Greg Alford round the neck in the box, pulling him down. It was as blatant a penalty as you could. And Foye was the referee that day, didn't give us anything. But having said that, Birmingham beat Reading 2-1, I think, and that got them there. They had the 2 points advantage. So, but the lads went again. We then went from then to the playoff at Preston, and I thought we were superb.
Magnificent performance, home and away. Fantastic.
It was, and we watched that game when we come back the following season, and we sat down, myself, God bless him, Speedo, Sam Ellis, and we didn't realise how good we were. We were.
The home game, they didn't have a chance. We restricted them to nothing.
Nothing. And Greg Alford's header. It was only 1-0, but it was a 1-0 battering.
Yeah.
And I know Alan Irvine graciously accepted that we were way, way better than them. So to be without a strike, and even that day, we had chance after chance after chance, and we could have lost it because of that. So, yeah, Craig Beattie and leaving was a big, big blow.
Yeah. Hal, actually, we interviewed Greg Halford, and Hal said about 4 or 5 times that we could have had a chair in our goal in that game and would have still won that game against
which
Preston.
I don't think Greg appreciated. I was meaning it as a joke, but I think he said that was a bit disparaging to Paddy and to Preston, but it wasn't quite meant like that.
But then we moved on to the playoff final against Burnley. We won't talk about the game too much or at all, really.
Do you know what it is? It's hot days and Sheffield United.
Yeah, we don't like the hot weather.
I mean, that day, I think it was 92 degrees down at pitch side.
Easy.
It was absolutely red hot. But, once again, as you'll have known, I'm sure if you've checked it, the referee was, who was it? What was his name? Anyway, we had 2 blatant penalties turned down. And after the game, I was asked, there were the 2 questions. But I'd had a run-in before the game anyway. We had this referee was the one we had at Sheffield Wednesday, and he'd sent off Kilgallen early in the season.
For the
was it Mike Dean?
Mike Dean. And I had given Mike Dean 0 out of 10 or out of 100, whatever it was, for his performance at Hillsborough that day. And who do we get in the final but Mike Dean? And I felt
that subconsciously.
I do.
Yeah.
Well, the questions afterwards were about the 2 blatant penalties. One on Howard and one on Carl Walker.
Oh, that was the Walker one is particularly galling.
Now, ironically, the following year we played Barnsley away, and Carl Walker got a penalty in exactly the same situation. So yeah, I do feel that it had played on his mind, and I'd question whether it was right that I'd given a referee 0 out of 100, and he takes the final. I mean, you're telling me there wasn't another referee that could have done. So I felt that we'd been let down, and I told him before the game. And as it was, we weren't brilliant on the day, but we could easily also have got a result. But that's how life is.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what sticks in my mind from after that game, your post-match interview? Did you allude to kind of maybe leaving, or was that just the emotions taking over after the defeat?
No, I felt that I knew the financial situation at the club was in dire situation. I knew players were going to have to be sold. And every time I build a squad, I've had it sold from underneath me. I had the same at Leeds United. We get to the playoff final and 5 players are sold straight after because we've got no money. And then the situation at Bramall Lane was, Carl's got to go, Carl Norton's got to go, Carl Walker's got to go, Kilgallen was up for sale, Quinney was up, and I just said, we've missed out on the final because we had to sell our best players. Where do you think I'm going to take the football club? Now, who gets the wrath of it all? It's the coach and the manager. You don't know what you're doing. Well, I'm afraid you do know what we're doing, but we have to keep our mouths shut at times because, you know, it's the detriment of the club if we do. So, yeah, there was, you know, and I had interest from other clubs. And the situation was that, you know, United were adamant that I had to stay, and I had a contract and I was prepared to honour it. But there was a time after the final that, you know, I could have left the club, and I honoured it this time. I felt that it was right to stay at the club, even though I know there was major problems. But and that's exactly what happened. All the players were sold, and we had to try and raise money left, right, and centre. And then the credit crunch came in 2008, and all the businesses were in serious trouble, and we had to refinance the club. And there was it was more the refinancing of the club and the finances of the club that stopped the progress that we were making at the time. But I understood that, because 2008, as we all know, was a world crisis on the financial markets. And 𝗵𝗍𝗶𝗲, to be fair to him, was trying to fund the club, knowing that his own businesses were being put under massive pressure financially.
The season after, you left after 2 games, which is quite unusual for a manager. What happened there?
Once again, I told people at the club that there were certain things that needed to be done. That if we carried on doing what we were doing with the selling of the players, don't forget the year before we'd sold a load of players, and I had 27 loans, which is a club record. 27 loans. We had 5 goalkeepers, I think. Paddy got done for his drug misdemeanor, and we had 5 goalkeepers. We had 27 loans, and and that's why I felt. I think we finished 7th. I think it was, or 8th, something like that. We the last game was at Ipswich 3-0. We beat Ipswich 3-0. And you can't keep playing loan players, 27 loan players. Like I said, I know it's a club record, because it was just every other week we were bringing players in. Every other week. And we brought a lad from Stoke, blonde-haired lad, I forget what his name at the top of my head. And he came 3.5 hours before we played Sheffield Wednesday at Bramall Lane. And it was one of those things. So that was the point where obviously I left after there. I told the club, I went over to Brussels to speak to 𝗵𝗍𝗶𝗲 and Trevor Birch, and explain where I felt the club was. Whether that was respected or not, I don't know. But I was disappointed to have gone after 2 games, that's for sure.
So let's stop talking about all the negative things and let's start talking about some positive things. Which players did you particularly enjoy working with?
I would say most of them. You know, one thing is, as a manager or as a coach, you cannot please all the players all the time. But like I said, you know, Chris Morgs was a great leader. Speedo, when he first started playing, when I had him as a player, terrific attitude. He would do everything the best, and he was an inspiration to the others. And I think the young players in the 𝗶𝗍𝗶𝗲s and the Walkers and those sort of people learned so much from his training methods and you know, the way he trained and looked after himself, that they bought into that, and that was a definite plus for us. It was great to see the likes of Greg Hallfield, who came in on loan for a year, but we turned him around. He lost his way, and then in the end, 4 or 5 clubs wanted to sign him, and he went to Wolves for 3.5, 4 million, I think. Paddy, I mean, I've had me run-ins with Paddy, but Paddy was great around the place. He had leadership qualities as well. Paddy, for as daft as a brush as he could be, he also had leadership qualities. As I say, Kilgallen was another one who, when I came back, I had him at Leeds, and I got him going, and I sold him to Neil at Sheffield United, and then he lost his way, and then once again he got his mojo back, and he played and then we sold him to Sunderland for 3 million. So there was, like I say, there was loads of players. We took a lad called Justin Haber from Malta. The goalkeeper. Well, what a lovely, he worked his socks off everywhere. He was never going to play, but the lads loved him. The lads loved him around the place, and he was a good pro. And to be fair to the kid, he went on and played quite a few years in Europe. But yeah, a number of players there. Paul Devlin, loved working with Dev. What a fiery character Dev was, but wow, you know, he'd give you everything on the pitch and off it. He was a character. Sean Murphy.
What about Monte?
God, Monty, loved Monty. Monty was so honest. I've only spoke to Monty 2 weeks ago, and he's now managing Central Coast Mariners and doing well. By the way, Monty. Well, I mean, I know with the gaffer, he used to say, right, go and mark Frank Lampard. And I remember I was at Watford one night, and Frank came up to me and he said, "Send Monty my regards, will you?" I said, "Yeah, I will do." Following day, I went into training. I said, "Monty, Frank came up to me last night, and I said, how do you know him then?" He said, "Oh no, I had to mark him at Chelsea when we marked Chelsea." He said, and after an hour, Frank said to him, "Will you f off? You keep following me. Will you just leave me alone?" And that was Monty. We know Monty was nicknamed the Rash.
Yeah.
And on the years that we went up, on all that year, particularly when we were absolutely phenomenal, Monty was given all the jobs of marking all the best players of the other team, and he was fabulous. Jags, Tommy, honestly, those three came through together, and were the backbone of the team for quite a few years. Jags, terrific ability. You know, if we were in the semi-final, and I remember Thierry Henry broke away, and Jags caught him up, and Thierry Henry could not believe it. Could not believe it. And that was Jags. But Jags, if you wanted to run at 30 mile an hour, Jags would run at 31. If you wanted to run at 36, he would run at 37. You know what I mean? He had that. And look what he did at Everton for all them years, and went on to play for England. Quinny Hart as big as a bucket, good player. There was so many, I could keep going on. Well, I was blessed really to have some really good players at the club.
And some characters.
Yeah.
I remember coming in one day and Beach was having a pink party over in Manchester, and I said, "Beach, you do realise you've got Chris Morgan coming, you've got Paddy coming, you've got some of the lads," but it was that bond. We had a great bond and a great team spirit, and I think that showed in that. It certainly in the year we got to third and to the final.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you a question about Michael Tongue, because we've got some quick fire questions to ask you in a second, which I think he might be the answer to one of them. Did you expect Michael Tongue to go on and have a slightly better career than what he did? Because we remember when he came through as that left winger, cutting in on his right, beating players left and right, and then he kind of got moved to central midfield. How did that kind of transition?
I mean, Tommy had a fantastic engine on him. Tommy could move up and down all day long, and it was one of those. I mean, I remember playing. We played Hull City when I came back the second time, and we were down to 10 men, I think. Someone got, I think, did Speedo get sent? I think, or was it Speedo or someone got sent off? Anyway, I could put 2 in against their 3 because Monty and Tongy and Quint and all that, they could run for England. They were phenomenal athletes, you know what I mean? And Tongy, we gave Tongy what we called the graveyard shift. So when we had that side with Tongy, we have Peter Rundlove on the right, and we let Peter Rundlove just go up and down the line and take people on. Whereas Tongy had to drop back in all the time, so we could at least have 3 people in the midfield in a 4. And Tongy was the graveyard shift, so we always knew we could lock up one side, and if they were to get out, our midfield knew that they'd have to track across to cover Nuddy when he went forward. And like I say, it worked really well. And then once again, I remember being we were at Bramble Lane on transfer deadline day, and myself and Sam Ellis, we thought 10 o'clock. It was 12. It was 11:59 was the cut-off time, and we went for there's the pasta place just up by Bramble Lane on the right hand side, the old bank, and said, "Look, Sam, it's 10 o'clock. Let's go and get something to eat. We were starving." We went there, and I got a phone call 10:30. Tony Pulis, Stoke City, £3 million for Tongy. And I had to ring Tongy up because it was there in the Premier League. And I said, "Look, Tongy, this is the situation." You know what I mean? And I said, "You've been brilliant for me in all the years." I mean, that was 2008 or 9, I think it was. And I'd had Tongy since 2000 when he came through. So I'd had him a long time, and I felt I owed him the right to have an opportunity. And if he wanted to take it, I wouldn't stand in his way. And that's what happened with Tongy.
Absolutely fair. I've got another question, which is going to be one of our final ones before we get to our quick fire, but it's something we need to revisit. and it's how did you patch things up with Neil Warnock, because you mentioned he wasn't too happy about some of your decisions, and then ended up to the stage where you work with him again, which is obviously great.
Yeah, I mean, Neil refused to speak to me, to acknowledge me in any way for about 5 years.
Wow.
And then I think the first time we spoke was that night we played Sheffield Wednesday at Bramall Lane, and it was a crack. It was, I think, was it 2-2 or 3-3 or something? It was a great game at Bramall Lane. And Neil had come there, and he came into the office afterwards, and we had a chat, a one-to-one chat. You know what I mean? And then I was managing somewhere else, and then Neil went to Crystal Palace, and he gave me a phone call. He said, "Look, Blackie, it's going to be my last job, and I'd like you to come with me." So
last
I went
job.
down to speak. Yeah, listen, exactly. So I said, "Okay." I went down and had a chat with him, and I went in alongside him at Crystal Palace, and then he left there, and we were with Rotherham rang. And Neil said, "Come on, Blackie, you said you'd stay with me till the end." So I said, "Fair enough." And we just once again had an unbelievable. Rotherham was an unbelievable run.
Yeah.
To do that, I remember people. I was asked questions the other day about memories in football and achievements, and Rotherham would be up there. And I know Neil's mentioned it before as well. Even though we've had all these promotions, Rotherham's up there because
Greg Halford said the same thing.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Did he? Yeah, it was phenomenal what we did there, what we achieved there. And obviously then we went on to do wonders at Cardiff City, and then Middlesbrough kept them up, reshaped the club, and that's how it is really. And then obviously I went back on my own, and I went to Thailand to manage one of the Premier League sides over there last year, and kept them up, and then got them to the FA Cup final over there. So, and then I've just come back. I've been back in the country about 5 weeks.
Wow, excellent. That sounds great. What was life like over in Thailand?
Well, I always wanted, before I finished my career, I wanted to try and manage abroad somewhere at a good level, to see, to test myself, to see how, I know I've coached all these years, and we've had a lot of success, and whether it's getting promoted or keeping clubs up, me and Neil normally get a phone call to say, "We're in trouble, can you save us?" And we've gone in and normally always done it.
Yeah.
And then I got a phone call out of the blue. To test myself over there was a different culture. The heat was intense, and I mean the heat in terms of the sun. The training facilities, and when you had to train at night, and so you had to change things around. But I was very proud to lead the team out in the FA Cup final last year in Bangkok against 𝗵𝗏𝗏, who were Leicester City's side, a very good team. It was a satisfying trip, that one, to know that, football is an international language. So even though I couldn't speak Thai, when I asked them to do certain things and I showed them with the ball or whatever, they bought into it. And like I say, I wanted to just do 12 months abroad, and that's what I've done. I've just come back, like I say, and then at the moment I'm just on having a rest and see what's what. But to be in the game still at 64, there isn't many people in the game at 64. There's only Roy and Neil and 2 or 3 others who are older than me. So, but I'm 10 years behind them. So when you say that, you're old at 64, Neil's 74. So, but I like I say, I don't want to be carrying on just for the sake of carrying on. If it's not going to be right, I won't do it. So, and that's where I am at the moment. So taking a bit of a rest, trying to use that swimming pool.
Yeah, absolutely. So we could see Kevin Blackwell managing another team in the English pyramid, if you like.
Yeah, I don't know whether I'd go outside the Championship below that. It's always been tough to try and manage down there. I've got massive respect for the coaches and the managers that do, because they have to do so much more work. They don't have the use for the facilities you do in the Championship and the Premier League. And I've been very lucky to have been at that level for the last 20 years. Using IT, making sure you've got enough scouts. Whereas down in the lower leagues, you have to nearly do all of it yourself. And you're always one arm tied behind your back. So I've got nothing but admiration for the lads there, and I'm not sure at this stage of my career that I want to be going down fighting that sort of stuff.
Well, Kevin Blackwell, thank you so much for giving up the time to speak with us. It's been really insightful. You're probably one of the most qualified people we've ever had the pleasure of speaking to when it comes to all your badges. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for the times that you gave to us as fans when we watched you as manager of Sheffield United. Overall, thank you again for everything. And hopefully we can speak again in the near future. Kevin Blackwell, thanks for everything.
Thank you.